Story 1. I was 13 when my uncle asked me to stay at his place for the weekend while he was out of town. He lived about 10 minutes from my house, in a quiet neighborhood with big yards and those long driveways that make it feel like every house is its own little world. He had a pool in the backyard, a garage attached to the house, and an old German shepherd named Roxy that was mostly lazy but would lose her mind if someone came near the fence. I didn't want to stay there alone, so I invited my best friend Mark to stay with me. We were both hyped about having the whole house to ourselves. No parents, no rules, just two kids eating junk food, watching horror movies, and messing around. My uncle had a big old tube TV in the garage with a fridge full of soda and an electric dartboard on the wall. We spent most of the night in there, tossing darts, watching movies, and talking about dumb stuff. It was close to 1 a.m. when I realized I forgot to turn off the pool pump. My uncle was big on keeping his energy bill low, and he'd specifically told me to shut it off before bed. "Come with me real quick," I said to Mark, getting up. "Nah, dude, it's creepy outside," he said, half laughing. "You go, I'll guard the chips." I rolled my eyes and opened the garage door that led to the backyard. But the second I did, I froze. It hit me like a wall, the overwhelming smell of burning meat. Not like a barbecue, not like cooked steak. It was rotting meat, mixed with something chemical, like burnt hair and plastic. It was thick, sticking in my throat, making my stomach turn. I didn't know where it was coming from, but it was strong, like something was smoldering just beyond the pool. Mark gagged behind me. "Dude, what the hell is that?" I don't know how to explain it, but the second I smelled it, I got this deep, primal sense of wrongness. Every part of me screamed, "Do not go outside." The backyard was pitch black beyond the porch light, and for the first time that night, I realized how alone we really were. "Forget the pump," I muttered, stepping back. Mark didn't argue. I shut the door hard, locking it. My heart was racing, but I told myself I was being stupid. Maybe someone was burning garbage. Maybe a raccoon got into something nasty. I wanted to believe that. But then Roxy started barking. Not her usual lazy bark. She was snarling. She was standing at the other door, the one that led into the house. Her back was stiff, her fur bristling, her teeth bared as she barked at the dark hallway beyond the kitchen. Mark and I just stared at her. "What's she barking at?" he whispered. I shook my head. The house was dark except for the light spilling in from the garage. There shouldn't have been anything in there. Then, bam! Roxy lunged forward, snapping at nothing, barking like she was losing her mind. It was like she was trying to scare something off, but there was nothing there. A deep, cold dread crawled up my spine. "Close the door," I said. "What if someone's in there?" Mark hissed. "Just close it, dude." He slammed it shut, and I twisted the lock. Roxy was still barking on the other side, claws scratching at the door like she was desperate. Then, the dartboard went insane. All the lights flashed at once, beeping wildly, numbers spinning. It was like someone was holding down every button at the same time. The robotic voice glitched out, stuttering numbers in this garbled, inhuman tone. Mark and I pressed ourselves against the door, staring at it. And then, just as suddenly as it started, everything stopped. The dartboard went silent. The lights stopped flashing. Roxy stopped barking. The smell was gone. The dread that had wrapped around my chest, squeezing my lungs, just vanished. For a long time, we didn't move. We just stood there waiting, listening. The house was silent. Roxy let out a low whine from the other side of the door. Mark swallowed. "Dude, what the hell just happened?" I had no answer. We didn't sleep that night. We stayed in the garage with all the lights on, backs pressed against the wall, listening to every creak and groan the house made. I didn't even go inside to get my bag. The next morning when my uncle came back, we tried to explain what happened. He just gave me this weird look and said, "You should have just left the pool pump on." I never stayed at his house alone again. Story 2. I was 12 when this happened, and to this day, I still don't have an explanation for it. I don't even like talking about it because every time I do, I feel like I'm inviting something back. It was a normal afternoon. I had just gotten home from school. Like always, I was the first one back. My siblings were at their after-school programs or hanging out with friends, and my parents were both at work. I was used to being alone for a couple of hours, and I actually liked it. No one to bother me, no one to tell me what to do. The first thing I did when I walked in was head to the kitchen to grab a snack. I remember dropping my backpack at the door, kicking my shoes off, and making my way toward the fridge. But as soon as I stepped into the kitchen, something felt off. I can't describe it exactly, but it hit me like a wave. My stomach twisted, like I was suddenly nauseous, but not in a way that made sense. It was deep, like something inside of me was warning me. I ignored it and opened the fridge, but by the time I reached for a juice box, I felt like I was going to be sick. I left the fridge open, gripping the counter for a second, trying to steady myself. My legs felt weak. I thought, maybe I just need to sit down. So I stumbled over to the dining table, pulled out a chair, and collapsed into it. The second I sat down, I noticed it, the silence. You don't really think about the little background noises in a house until they're gone. The fridge humming, the clock ticking, the slight creaks in the walls. All of it was missing. It wasn't just quiet, it was empty. I sat there, head hanging down, hands on my lap, trying to breathe through the sick feeling. Then, a noise directly beneath me, a sharp, crumpling sound, like someone had taken a piece of paper and crushed it in their hand. But it wasn't faint, it wasn't distant, it was right under my chair. I froze. My body locked up so hard I don't even think I was breathing. I didn't move, I didn't look, I just listened. Silence again. For a split second, I convinced myself I imagined it, that my ears were playing tricks on me. And then, a giggle, a tiny, breathy giggle, right behind me. I launched myself out of that chair so fast it scraped against the floor, making an awful screech. My heart was hammering, my skin was ice cold. I stumbled backward, hands gripping the edge of the table, and then I heard them, footsteps, light but fast, running from the kitchen down the hallway toward the front of the house. I couldn't move. My eyes locked onto the dark hallway, my ears straining to catch anything else. The sound was fading, but I knew what I heard. Somebody ran down that hall. I don't know how long I stood there paralyzed. A second? A minute? It felt like forever. And then finally I moved. Slowly, carefully, I backed up. 1 step, 2 steps, until I hit the wall. My hands were shaking. My breath was coming in short, shallow gasps. I kept my eyes on the hallway, but I had this awful, gut-wrenching feeling that if I stood there any longer, something was going to come back. So I turned and ran. I bolted through the kitchen, fumbled with the back door lock, and nearly tripped over myself as I tore out of the house. I didn't stop, didn't look back. I ran straight to my friend's house 3 doors down. I don't even remember knocking. I just burst in, gasping for air, face white as a sheet. His mom looked at me like I was crazy, but I barely managed to choke out that I needed to call my mom. When I finally got her on the phone, I told her everything. She was quiet for a long time. Then she just said, "Stay there. Don't go back until I get home." I don't know what I wanted her to say, but that wasn't it. That made it worse. That made it real. I never told my siblings, never told my dad. My mom never brought it up again, and I never asked. But after that day, something changed in that house. It was just a little colder, a little quieter, and I never sat in that chair again. Story 3. I was driving through a remote stretch of highway, the kind where you don't see another car for hours. No houses, no towns, just endless road cutting through empty land. The radio had long since faded to static, and my phone had no service. It was just me, the hum of my engine, and the dark. I wasn't paying much attention, just letting my thoughts drift when I saw her. A woman walking alone on the side of the road. She was dressed in white, some kind of long robe or dress, the fabric flowing in the wind. Her hair was dark, hanging down past her shoulders. She didn't look up as I approached, just kept walking, one hand raised slightly, as if she was waving for help. I felt a chill roll through me. There was no reason for anyone to be out here. Not on this road, not at this time of night. I passed her, watching in my rearview mirror as she faded into the distance. Every instinct told me to keep driving, but something about her, maybe the way she walked or the way she held up her hand made me hesitate. It was stupid. I never picked up hitchhikers. My parents had drilled that into me growing up. You don't stop for strangers. Not ever. But leaving someone alone out here? That felt worse. Cursing under my breath, I slowed down and put the car in reverse. I kept my eyes on the mirror, watching as I backed up the road toward her. She was still there, still walking. And then, she was gone, just like that. 1 second she was in my rearview mirror, the next she wasn't. I slammed on the brakes. The road behind me was empty. No trees, no ditches. Just open land stretching out on both sides, nowhere to hide. My headlights cast long beams into the night, illuminating nothing but dirt and asphalt. My stomach dropped. I checked my mirrors again, looked over my shoulder, opened my door and leaned out, hoping to see her just off the side of the road. Maybe I'd misjudged the distance. Maybe she'd stepped into a dip I hadn't noticed. But there was no one. I sat there, heart hammering, my car idling in the middle of an empty highway. The silence felt too heavy, too thick. The air itself seemed wrong. I don't know how else to explain it. I hit the gas and got the hell out of there. I drove faster than I should have, checking my mirrors more times than I can count. But she never reappeared. The road stayed empty, stretching out endlessly into the night. I don't know what I saw. I don't want to know. Story 4. I work the night shift at a psychiatric facility. It's not a hospital, more of a long-term care place for people who need supervision, but aren't in immediate crisis. The building is old, been around since the 70s, maybe earlier, and it's got that outdated institutional feel. Fluorescent lights, beige tile, that faint hospital cleaner smell that never really goes away. I usually take my breaks around 2 or 3 a.m. when things are calm. It was one of those nights where nothing much was happening, no emergencies, no patients acting out. Just the usual rounds, checking on people, making sure no one was trying to wander off or hurt themselves. Around 2:30 a.m., I decided to take a quick bathroom break. Now the women's bathroom on my floor is big. 8 stalls, 2 sinks, a couple of paper towel dispensers. It's usually empty at night since most of the staff are either busy or using the break room restroom. But when I walked in, almost all the stalls were occupied. I could see feet under the doors, some in sneakers, a pair in those ugly orthopedic nursing shoes. Someone had left a cup of coffee on the counter by the sink, still steaming. Didn't think much of it. People take breaks at weird times on night shifts. I went into the second to last stall, did my business and scrolled on my phone for a minute, maybe 2. Then I came out, and every stall was empty. I mean empty. No feet under the doors, no sound of flushing, no sinks running, no one drying their hands. Just nothing. The coffee cup was still sitting on the counter, exactly where it had been. I felt this weird twisting feeling in my stomach, like the air had shifted somehow. The silence wasn't normal silence. It was heavy, like the room was holding its breath. I stood there staring at the stalls, trying to convince myself I'd just missed them leaving. But I would have heard something. The doors in that bathroom are heavy. They make this loud whooshing noise when they swing shut, and the latches always clack. I stepped forward and nudged one of the stall doors open. It swung inward, empty. I checked another. Same. My breathing sounded too loud. The only sign that anyone had ever been there was the coffee cup. I didn't touch it. I backed out of the bathroom, walked quickly, not running, but not lingering either, straight back to the nurse's station. Nobody said anything about a group leaving together. No one mentioned taking a break at the same time. And when I casually asked the few women working that night if they'd been in the restroom, they just shook their heads. No one had. I didn't go back into that bathroom for the rest of my shift. Story 5. I grew up in a small town, the kind where everyone knows everyone. It wasn't rural, but it wasn't exactly a bustling city either. Just rows of houses, a few small businesses, and one way in and out of my estate, a narrow tree-lined road that stretched for about half a mile between the main street and the first set of houses. It was a road I had walked probably 1,000 times. This happened when I was about 13 or 14, somewhere in the late autumn months. It had gotten dark early, as it does that time of year, and the air had that damp chill that clung to your clothes. I had been out with a few friends, nothing out of the ordinary, just loitering around like kids do when they have nowhere to be. By the time I started heading home, it was close to 9 p.m. The streets were quiet, mostly empty. A few porch lights flickered in the distance, but for the most part, it was just me. Like I said, the road to my estate was the only way in or out. A narrow stretch with overgrown hedges on either side, and a few old streetlights that barely gave off any real light. If I had to describe it, I'd say it always had a bit of a strange vibe, even in the daytime. Not scary exactly, just off. You ever walk somewhere and feel like you're not supposed to be there? That was this road at night. Still, I wasn't scared. I had walked it so many times that I barely thought about it. I pulled my hood up, stuffed my hands in my pockets, and picked up the pace, my breath coming out in faint white puffs in the cold. The only sound was the distant hum of traffic from the main road behind me and the occasional rustling of leaves when the wind kicked up. I was about halfway down when I felt it. A hand. It gripped my right shoulder, firm, strong, fingers pressing through the fabric of my hoodie, like they meant to hold me in place. It wasn't just a brush or a tap, it was a grip, a full, deliberate squeeze. I stopped dead. My heart slammed against my ribs, my whole body locked up like I had been dropped into freezing water. For a second, I didn't even turn around. I just stood there, every hair on my body standing on end, waiting for the owner of that hand to say something, to move, to let go. Nothing. Then, almost in slow motion, I turned my head. There was no one there. I spun around completely, breath caught in my throat, scanning the dark road behind me. Empty. I was alone. I stood there for maybe half a second longer than I should have, trying to process what had just happened. I knew what I felt. It wasn't my imagination. I could still feel the ghost of pressure on my shoulder, like the fingers had only just lifted off me. Then something in me snapped, and I ran. I didn't think, didn't look back, just bolted, legs pumping, breath heaving in short gasps. I could hear my own footsteps slamming against the pavement, echoing unnaturally loud in the quiet night. The road stretched on forever, the streetlights above casting long, flickering shadows. By the time I reached my estate, I didn't stop running. Not until I was at my front door, fumbling with my keys, practically throwing myself inside and slamming the door shut behind me. I stood there for a long time, back pressed against the door, chest rising and falling in ragged breaths. My shoulders still tingled. I didn't tell anyone right away. What was I supposed to say? That I got grabbed by someone who wasn't there? That I lost my mind for a second? It didn't make sense. But later that night, when the adrenaline wore off and the fear turned into curiosity, I started looking things up. And that's when I found it. A few months before, a man had died on that road. Not just died, killed himself. I didn't know him. I don't think I had ever even seen him, but I read enough to know he had lived alone, not far from where it happened. No real family, no real connections. And now it seemed, maybe not even gone. I never walked that road alone at night again. Story 6. I don't tell this story often, mostly because I hate the way it sounds when I do. It makes me feel crazy. It's not even the scariest thing that's ever happened to me, but it's the one thing I can't explain, and that's what gets to me. This was about 10 years ago, in the summer. I was in college at the time, back home for the break, and a bunch of us would hang out almost every night at my buddy Luke's place. Luke's family had money, like real money. His house wasn't just a house, it was a damn mansion. Not some new construction McMansion either, but one of those old historic estates that had been standing for well over a century. The kind of place with a name, like something manor, even though no one called it that. It had 20-something rooms, a ridiculous number of bathrooms, and this massive patio out back with an iron table and chairs that probably cost more than my car. The place always felt too big. Even with a bunch of us there, it felt empty, like sound just got swallowed up by all the space. Luke's parents were out of town that week, so we had the house to ourselves. That meant we could be loud, drink a little, and just do whatever. That night it was me, Luke, Sean, and Tyler. We weren't partying or anything, just sitting outside on the patio, talking about dumb shit, drinking a few beers. The air was heavy, hot, the kind of humid that makes you feel like you're breathing through a wet rag. There was no wind, barely any bugs, just stillness. At some point, I remember looking up at the house and thinking how dark it was. Most of the lights were off inside, and with no one else home, it gave me this weird feeling. Not quite uneasy, but aware. You know what I mean? Like when you're suddenly too conscious of your own surroundings. The house loomed over us, 3 stories tall, black windows like empty sockets staring down. I shook the feeling off and turned back to the conversation. Then it started. It was soft at first, just a distant hum. At first I thought maybe I imagined it. Then it swelled, rising like a tide, filling the night air. Singing, not just singing. Opera. It was clear as day. A woman's voice, high and lilting, carrying through the heavy air. Not words, just this eerie, ghostly melody. Long, drawn-out notes, swelling and dipping in a way that sent a chill straight through me. I froze. We all did. No one spoke. No one moved. Just 4 guys sitting stiff as boards around a patio table, listening to something that should not have been there. Luke's house was isolated. His nearest neighbors were at least half a mile down the road, and there was nothing but thick trees between them. There was no way this was coming from a speaker. No way it was a prank. It wasn't muffled or distant. It was right there, like someone was standing just out of sight singing to us. Sean was the first to react. He shot me this wild-eyed look, his mouth slightly open like he wanted to say something but couldn't. Tyler just whispered, "What the fuck?" Then Luke moved. He shot up so fast his chair scraped against the stone patio, the sound cutting through the singing like a knife. "Inside now!" We didn't argue. We bolted. I don't even remember getting up. 1 second I was sitting there listening, heart hammering. The next I was shoving through the back door into the kitchen, slamming it behind me. Sean nearly ran into the counter. Tyler locked the door, like that would actually do anything. The house was dead silent. No music, no voices, just our breathing, ragged and sharp in the too still air. Luke turned to us, his face pale. "You all heard that, right?" Nobody answered. We didn't need to. We stood there listening, waiting to see if it would start again. It didn't. Just silence. I don't remember how long we stayed like that before someone laughed. A nervous, too loud, this is stupid kind of laugh. I think it was Sean. "Dude, what the fuck was that?" No one had an answer. We tried to explain it. Maybe it was the wind carrying sound from somewhere. Maybe someone was messing with us. Maybe it was the heat playing tricks on our ears. We threw out theories, but none of them made sense. There was no explanation that actually fit. After a while, we tried to act normal, like it hadn't happened, but we didn't go back outside. We stayed in the kitchen, pretending to be okay, pretending we weren't listening for something we couldn't explain. The singing never came back. None of us ever talked about it again after that night. Story 7. I was dead tired that night. Placement had been brutal, and by the time I got home, all I wanted to do was crash. I didn't even bother changing out of my clothes, just kicked off my shoes, threw myself onto the bed, and turned my laptop on. My bed was against the wall, and I was lying on my side facing the screen. To my left was my desk chair, positioned right next to my bed. It was facing me, like someone had been sitting there. I remember checking the time, 10:42 p.m. The next thing I remember, my eyes were closing on their own. I wasn't even trying to sleep, but this wave of exhaustion just took over, and I drifted off, and then I was at university. It was strange because everything felt normal. I was sitting in class like I always did. The professor was droning on about something, and people around me were either half listening or scribbling in their notebooks. I remember turning my head toward the door because someone had just walked in. She had long black hair. It fell over her face, hiding it completely, but I somehow knew she was looking at me. She wasn't a student, she wasn't a professor, but nobody else reacted to her. She spoke, but her voice wasn't quite right. It was pleasant, but off, like it was coming from too far away. "You have won a prize." I didn't know what to say. She lifted a hand and gestured for me to follow her, and I did. I don't know why, but I didn't feel scared at first. There was something strangely familiar about her, something that made me trust her. We walked down a hallway, just the two of us. My footsteps echoed, but hers didn't. I asked her, "What kind of prize?" "You will see," she said, "but first you must do something for it." "What?" "You must give a speech." I stopped walking. "What?" "A speech," she repeated, still in that distant, too calm voice, "in front of many people. Then you will receive your prize." "Yeah, no," I said, shaking my head. "Not happening. I don't do public speaking." She didn't argue. She just kept walking, and somehow my feet followed her again. We reached a door at the end of the hallway. She stepped aside and gestured toward it. "Go inside." I hesitated. "Open it," she said. I did, and then I was staring into a massive auditorium. A long red carpet stretched from the door to a stage. Rows and rows of seats were filled with people, all of them turned toward me. An announcer's voice boomed overhead, calling my name. The audience erupted into applause. My stomach dropped. "Nope," I said immediately, turning back toward the door. "You can keep your prize." She was standing behind me. I hadn't even heard her move. I tried stepping back, but she shoved me forward. I stumbled but caught myself. "I don't want it," I told her. "I don't want your prize." And that's when she got angry. The air around her changed. It was like the temperature dropped all at once. And for the first time, I felt something I hadn't before. Something wrong. I barely had time to react before she slapped me on the back. It wasn't just a slap. It was 10 slaps at once. A force like nothing I had ever felt before. Like 1,000 hands striking me at the exact same moment. My entire back exploded in pain, and the impact sent me jolting forward. I woke up gasping, practically throwing myself out of my bed. My back was burning. I spun around expecting... What? Expecting to see her? Expecting someone to be standing in my room? The chair next to my bed was empty, but I felt it. I felt the pain where she had slapped me. My skin was throbbing. I stumbled to my feet, heart hammering, and ran to the mirror. I pulled up my shirt and turned to look over my shoulder. There was a handprint on my back, a real visible red handprint. I checked the time. Only 10 minutes had passed. Story 8. I was 12 when my mom and I moved into that house. It was a small, older place on the edge of town, the kind of house that had seen a lot of people come and go over the years. Nothing special about it, really. Beige siding, creaky floors, a yard that was mostly weeds. It was just the two of us. My parents had divorced a few years before, and my dad had moved out of state. Mom worked long hours, so I spent a lot of time alone. It started not long after we moved in. The first time I saw the handprints, I didn't think much of it. I was in the bathroom after a shower, wiping the condensation off the mirror when I noticed them. Small, child-sized handprints on the glass, just below where my reflection was. At first, I thought maybe I'd touched the mirror at some point, or maybe it was just some weird residue from cleaning products. I wiped them away without another thought, but they came back. Not every time I showered, but often enough that I started paying attention. The prints were always the same, small like a kid's hands, maybe a 5 or 6-year-old. I was almost 13, and my hands were bigger than that. And besides, I hadn't touched the mirror. The first time I tried to rationalize it. The second time, I hesitated. By the 5th or 6th time, I was just staring at them, heart pounding in my chest. I asked my mom about it once. "Have you ever noticed, weird stuff in the bathroom?" I kept my voice casual, but I could feel my skin crawling just saying it out loud. She frowned. "Like what?" I hesitated. It sounded ridiculous, even to me. "Like handprints on the mirror after a shower." Mom didn't even look up from the bill she was sorting. "You probably just touched the mirror at some point and didn't realize it." I didn't argue, but I knew she was wrong. I stopped wiping them away right away. The next time I showered, I left the prints there, letting the fog on the mirror fade naturally. When I came back later that night, the prints were gone. Not smeared, not faded, just gone. That was when I really started to feel it. The weight in the air when I was alone in the bathroom. The way the silence felt too heavy, too thick. The feeling of being watched. Not all the time, not everywhere, Just there, just in the bathroom. And then, one night, I decided to test something. I took a deep breath before stepping into the shower, heart already beating too fast. I had to know. I turned the water on, as hot as I could stand it, letting steam fill the small bathroom. My reflection blurred in the mirror. I kept my eyes on it. I washed quickly, barely paying attention to what I was doing. The whole time I could feel something. Not a presence exactly, just a wrongness in the air, pressing against my skin. The sound of the water seemed too loud, like it was covering something else up. When I finally turned the water off, I forced myself to wait. The steam was thick. The mirror was completely fogged over. I swallowed hard and reached out with a trembling hand, wiping just enough condensation away to see. My breath caught in my throat. The handprints were already there, not appearing gradually, not forming as the mirror cleared. Already there, fully formed, small and perfect. And this time, there were more of them. Not just 2 little hands, but 4, 6, 8. More than I could count, scattered across the mirror in a way that made my stomach twist. They hadn't been there when I got in. I stood frozen, too scared to breathe. My ears were ringing, my vision tunneling, and then I saw it. Between the handprints, low on the glass, where a child's face might be, something moved. Just the faintest impression of something shifting behind the fog. Not a reflection, not me, something else. I ran, didn't dry off, didn't grab a towel, didn't even turn the light off. I tore out of the bathroom and slammed the door behind me, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I sat outside the door for what felt like forever, staring at the crack beneath it like I expected something to come crawling out. Eventually, my mom knocked on my bedroom door, frowning when she saw me sitting there. "What are you doing?" I looked up at her, my throat dry. "Did you ever hear anything about this house?" She raised an eyebrow. "Like what? Like, who lived here before us?" She shrugged. "Just some older couple. They didn't have kids." I swallowed. "Before them?" She frowned, looking uncomfortable. "I don't know." "Why?" I didn't answer. I never told her what I saw, and I never, ever used that mirror again. Story 9. I used to live in a small apartment with my fiancée, Anna. It wasn't anything fancy, just an old 2-bedroom place in a building that had been around since the 1930s. The kind of place where the pipes knocked in the winter and the floors creaked even when nobody was walking on them. It had character, you could say. At first, everything was normal. We moved in, unpacked, and went about our lives. I worked nights at a warehouse, so I'd sleep in the mornings while Anna was at work. She was a nurse. Long shifts, lots of nights away. That meant I spent a lot of time alone in that apartment. I never thought much about it, until the door. There was one door in the apartment, the bedroom across from the bathroom, that seemed wrong. I don't know how else to put it. It wasn't just an old door that wouldn't latch properly or one that swung open from uneven floors. No, this door had moods. For weeks at a time, it would be fine, just a door. But then, every now and then, it would start doing things. It wouldn't stay closed. I'd shut it, hear the latch click, and a few minutes later, I'd hear it creak open. I'd close it again, only for it to slowly push open a moment later, almost like someone was peeking out from inside the empty room. At first, I thought maybe there was a draft. The windows were old and the place was never fully sealed from the outside air. But no matter how many times I tested it, the door didn't move unless it was in one of its moods. And then it escalated. One night, I came home from work, exhausted, and walked straight to the bathroom. As I passed that door, I noticed it was already halfway open. I could have sworn I left it closed that morning. I sighed, shaking my head, and reached out to push it shut. But before my hand could touch it, slam! The door slammed shut so violently that the walls shook. I jumped back, heart hammering. I stood there frozen, staring at it. My first thought, because I wanted an explanation, any explanation, was that maybe Anna had come home early. Maybe she was in the room and had slammed it by accident. "Anna?" I called, my voice a little too shaky for my liking. Silence. I reached for the doorknob and turned it. The door wouldn't open. It wasn't locked. There was no lock on it, but it felt stuck, like something was pressing against it from the other side. I pushed harder. The wood groaned, but it didn't budge. "Anna!" I called again, louder this time. Nothing. I stepped back, breathing heavily. My hands were shaking. I had to be overreacting, right? It was an old door in an old apartment. Maybe the wood swelled, maybe... Then the knob turned. From the other side. I stumbled backwards so fast I nearly tripped over myself. The door didn't open, but I heard the faint, deliberate sound of metal clicking, as if someone was gripping the handle and twisting it. Just enough for me to hear it, just enough to let me know someone was there. Only there wasn't. There couldn't be. I took another step back, then another, never taking my eyes off the door. My breathing was shallow, sharp, like I'd just run a mile. The knob stopped moving. The apartment was dead silent. And then, creak. The door slowly began to open. I didn't wait. I turned and bolted for the front door, nearly ripping it off its hinges as I stumbled out into the hallway. I stood there panting, my heart thudding so loudly I swore it was echoing off the walls. I didn't go back in that night. I couldn't. I sat in my car until sunrise, watching the apartment from the parking lot, half expecting to see something, someone, peer out from behind that window. When Anna came home, she found me still sitting there, pale and shaking. I told her everything. She didn't laugh. She didn't roll her eyes. She just listened, her face growing more and more serious. And then she said something that made my stomach drop. "I've heard it too," she whispered. She never mentioned it before, because she didn't want to scare me. But she had heard the door creak open on its own at night, more than once. She had felt something watching her from that room. We didn't live there much longer. When we moved out, I gave that door one last look. It sat there, perfectly normal, like none of it had ever happened. But I knew better. Story 10, I grew up in a pretty quiet town. Nothing too exciting ever really happened. But if you looked hard enough, there were places people whispered about, haunted roads, old abandoned buildings, cemeteries where people claimed to see things. I had a best friend, Emma, who was just as obsessed with that kind of stuff as I was. We spent a lot of nights driving to those places, trying to scare ourselves. Most of the time it was just that, us scaring ourselves. You get into the right headspace, a dark road looks darker, a noise sounds closer, and suddenly you're convinced you're being watched. Usually we could explain it away. But there was one night I have never been able to explain, and I have tried. We weren't even going far that night, just staying in our own town, checking out a bridge that supposedly had some creepy history. It was one of those back roads, the kind with no streetlights, just pavement stretching into the dark. But before we got there, we had to drive through a residential neighborhood, a place we had both been through a million times. It was just houses, normal houses, quiet, with their porch lights on, cars in the driveways. I remember Emma was driving, and we were just talking about nothing, laughing about something stupid. She turned onto a street we both knew well, a cut-through road that connected two of the main streets in town. And that's when I saw it, the gravel road. It was directly in front of us, leading into the woods. I blinked. "What the hell?" I said, sitting up straighter. Emma didn't say anything at first. She was staring ahead, her hands tight on the wheel. I turned to look at her. "Emma," she swallowed. "I don't know." That was when I realized she was just as confused as I was. We had been through this neighborhood so many times. It was a normal suburban area. No woods, no gravel road. But there it was, stretching ahead of us, disappearing into the trees. And Emma did something that made my stomach drop. She turned onto it. The second the tires hit the gravel, I felt it, that deep, gut-level wrongness. It felt like stepping into cold water, like all the air had been sucked out of the car. The sound of the tires crunching over the rocks was deafening. The road curved almost immediately, cutting off our view of the neighborhood behind us. I turned in my seat, looking out the back window. It was just trees. Thick black trees pressing in on either side of us. No houses, no streetlights, no sign that we had just come from a completely normal neighborhood. I looked at Emma. "Dude, where the hell are we?" She didn't answer. She just kept driving, her knuckles white on the wheel. The road twisted and turned. It was narrow, barely wide enough for her car. The trees on either side were thick, And the further we went, the more it felt like we were being swallowed by them. I felt like I couldn't breathe. "This isn't right," I whispered. Emma nodded. "I know." I grabbed my phone, hands shaking as I pulled up Google Maps. The blue dot that was supposed to show our location was just floating. No road, no marker, no nothing. "Emma, stop the car." She didn't. "I'm serious, stop the car." She hit the brakes so hard I lurched forward. The car sat idling, headlights barely illuminating the path ahead. I looked out the window. Just trees. No wind, no movement. The night was too still. I tried to open my door, but something in me screamed not to. I gripped the handle, staring into the trees, and I swear to God, it felt like they were staring back. I turned to Emma, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. "I don't think we're supposed to be here," she said quietly. Something moved in the trees. I heard it more than saw it. Branches shifting, a slow, rustling sound, like something was sliding between the trees. We weren't alone. "Go," I said. "Emma, go." She slammed her foot on the gas. The tires spun in the gravel before catching, and we shot forward. I watched out the window, my breath coming fast and shallow, waiting to see something, waiting for whatever was in the trees to step into the light. The road twisted again, and again. There was no sign of an end. "We didn't drive this far," I said, my voice shaking. Emma didn't answer. Her face was pale, jaw clenched tight. The road should have ended by now. We hadn't driven that far in, but it just kept going. I checked my phone again. No service, no GPS. The time on the screen wasn't changing. I felt sick. And then finally, Emma sucked in a sharp breath. There. Ahead of us, the road opened up. The trees thinned. I saw pavement. We shot out of the woods so fast Emma nearly lost control of the car. The second the tires hit asphalt, she slammed on the brakes and we both sat there breathing hard. We were back. I turned around in my seat. The gravel road was gone. Behind us was just the normal neighborhood. Houses, streetlights, the cut-through road we had driven 1,000 times before. I felt like I was going to throw up. Emma didn't say a word. She just put the car in drive and took me home. Neither of us slept that night. Thanks for watching. Don't leave before leaving a like to this video. Also hit the subscribe button to support my work. And as always, have a horrific nightmare, my dear.